Could Saskatchewan's Minister for Crown Corporations be facing jail time in a couple of months in defiance of federal carbon pricing tax laws? The province, which runs the provincial power generation company, stopped collecting the carbon tax on home heating on January 1st. It was protesting the Fed's exemption of home heating oil from the tax, a move that primarily benefits Atlantic Canada. The Saskatchewan carbon tax carve-out is illegal, but the province hasn't actually broken the law yet, because their carbon tax bill isn't due to Ottawa until the end of February. So is Saskatchewan setting up a legal showdown with the feds, or is there some political will on either side to negotiate? Let's bring in our first front bench of the year to talk about that. With me tonight, former senior advisor to the Liberal Ontario governments of Dalton McGuinty and Kathleen Wynne, Dan Moulton. He's now a partner with Crestview Strategy. Shakir Chambers worked in Prime Minister Stephen Harper's office before becoming a policy advisor to the International Trade Minister. He's now a principal at Earnscliffe Strategies. Kathleen Monk is the former director of communications to the late Jack Layton. She's now the principal owner of Monk and Associates. And Laura Stone is a Queen's Park reporter for the Globe and Mail. Hello, everyone.
Hey,
very nice to see you. Happy New Year. Shakir, I'll start with you. We've talked about so many different court challenges to environmental legislation from the feds, from the provinces, lots of political conjecture. This is the first time a province has been like, we're just not going to pay it, or at least we're not going to collect it. Do you think they end up paying it, or do you think something gives in the interim?
I don't think Premier Moe has any reason to negotiate. And I say this because for him, it's an election year. And I think a lot of what's happening right now, he's not so worried about, implementation of this policy. I think he's more worried about the politics of it. And I think for him, fighting the feds, we've said it before, it's good politics in Alberta, it's good politics in Saskatchewan. I think when you have the overarching theme of fairness and equality, given how they position this against Atlantic Canada, you have the overarching theme of cost of living. They're going to make your life more affordable by not paying this carbon tax on your natural gas. I think he has a lot of support here. And I think we'll see what happens, how Saskatchewan's kind of view this moving forward. But he also has a lot of people echoing what he's saying, which is going to only embolden him, right? You have premiers across Canada, I think all but two, that really kind of enforces his view, whether it's review the carbon tax, pause the carbon tax, or scrap it entirely. You got First Nation groups that are actually opposed to it, and you have farmers that are actually opposed to it as well. So I think as long as he has these groups singing from the same song sheet, I don't think he has any room for negotiation, and I think he's looking for that confrontation.
I think, Kathleen, that Shakir's right that in reflecting the sentiment that exists for sure among a number of groups in a number of provinces. But sort of like I started, there's a little bit of a delineation. This isn't just saying this is bad, we don't like it, we're going to challenge it in the courts and take it right to the Supreme Court. It's literally saying, and we're going to talk to the Minister of the Crown Corporations tomorrow on the show, but it's literally saying, like, we've decided this law doesn't apply to us. Are there any political consequences to that, or is Shakir right? Probably not.
I think there could be political consequences down the line, but what I would pick up from what Shakir said is they are singing from the same song sheet, and that song sheet is there's an election, there's an election, there's an election this year, and there is no subtlety to this at all. It's all about picking a fight. They need a boogeyman. They've chosen Justin Trudeau to be that boogeyman. And the reality is that basically the Saskatchewan government and Premier Moe has decided to eat this cost, right? They're still charging folks the carbon tax, but then putting a government of Saskatchewan rebate on it, right? So whether they actually remit that money to the feds at the end of February, like you say, is really the question. But in the meantime, you've got the Minister of Crowns doing media tours and basically almost in some ways...
He said he's willing to go to jail.
I think he may have a desire to go to carbon tax jail. The way he talks about it, it almost kind of seems like it's a bit of a fetish. I'm not really sure what's going on there at all. But I think the reality is that the people of Saskatchewan would rather people focus on things like the healthcare crisis. We saw stories just in the last couple of weeks about hospitals being shut down due to breaking fire code, like literally breaking the fire code because of all of the folks that are lined up in the hallways. We know that they're sending over 1,000 women for mammograms to Calgary because they can't actually get the procedures done in the province. So when I think about the political consequences, I think they actually might fall back onto the beginning question, onto Moe for not actually doing the things that the people of Saskatchewan want him to focus on, which is healthcare and the crisis that's happening there now.
Yeah, I do think Kathleen is right that there are a lot of really important provincial topics right now, Dan, that the Premier is getting, very valid, challenging questions on. I do also think that at the same time, it can be true that the sentiment that underpins this, that there's something unjust about the application of the carbon tax, especially with what happened with Atlantic Canada, is generally felt among Saskatoonians too, that there is a level, not necessarily I'm saying that they support breaking the law, but that the sentiment that underpins it is pretty supported pretty widely in Saskatchewan.
Sure, but that's not new, right? I don't think any decision the federal government has taken in recent months has changed the climate of how people perceive or feel about the carbon tax in the province of Saskatchewan in any particular way. There's always been an opposition to it. There's always been a public resentment about this tax. We even saw these Western provinces take the feds to court, trying to challenge their right as a federal government to institute these fees. And so they lost that. I mean, there is a problem, I think, here for the provincial government politically in two moments. One is in which they actually do end up remitting this tax. And to Kathleen's point, they take that money out of general revenues from the province because a court orders them to, taking it away from schools and hospitals, priorities that the people of Saskatchewan are probably far more politically concerned about right now as the election approaches. That would be a very bad look for the government. That would be a very bad look for Premier Moe in that circumstance. And then the other moment is, of course, after tax filings are done, when people are expecting the carbon rebate from their tax return, and there is less money available to be able to do that. And so you could actually have a lot of people in Saskatchewan, worse off than they would have been over the last number of years after they received that rebate from the tax system.
I think both of those points, Laura, that the rebate could go down and that the money might have to come out of general revenue are really good facts, right? That should be on the table. Why do you think that the Premier of Saskatchewan has made a political calculation, to essentially disregard them?
I think he sees this issue as a political winner for him, as the guests have said. I mean, obviously, there's nuances and complications to this that are part of the package. But I think he views, probably the carbon tax as particularly unpopular in his province, and he wants to run in an election on that. I think what's interesting that we're seeing now is really the province putting the ball back in Ottawa's court, saying, look, we're not doing anything yet. We still have a couple of months to work this out. Saskatchewan, I think, wants to appear like they're the reasonable party here, and it's Ottawa that are the crazy ones, to put it in their terminology, possibly. And so, I think they're trying to really kind of paint the narrative as, the federal government has started this. They started the fight. We just want to be treated as equally as everyone else. And so I think, there's probably some sensitivity on their part to how this could be perceived by the public based on all those points we've heard. And so they want to show that, look, we're the reasonable ones. Ottawa could easily solve this and treat us the same as the other parts of the country, particularly the Atlantic provinces. So I think there is some reticence here on the part of Saskatchewan to not come out kind of full force right away and at the beginning of January, to give Ottawa some time and have them be the reactive party here and not Saskatchewan itself.
Yeah, they're certainly framing it in that way. Like, we don't have to remit till the end of February. Ottawa still has time in the interim. We don't even have time because I have to take a break. But the big question is whether Ottawa's going to throw them in carbon jail. I have no idea. It's going to be
probably
really
not
interesting to see. I don't know. Probably not is a good bet.